This is Liverpool's Man Island. When I was a kid, all that was here was a ferry terminal and a bus station that smelt of donuts and despair. Now, there's an extraordinary agglomeration of artistic buildings. There's the Museum of Liverpool with a display dedicated to me. Beyond that, there's the inevitable Beatles Museum. There's also canals, cafes, all kinds of things. And over here, there's this most extraordinary building, the new Open Eye Gallery. We're here to look at its two opening exhibitions by Mitch Epstein and Chris Steele-Perkins, and to study their extraordinary photographic archive.
Welcome to the gallery. The early Open Eye was kind of a cluster of all sorts of different things. People were making films and recording records. You could make cheap recordings there.
It was quite hippie-ish, wasn't it, in the early days?
Yeah, I think there were lots of different things. It was kind of a hub of alternative, kind of countercultural Liverpool at the time, and a real mix of different things.
And in contrast,
this is our main exhibition for the reopening. It's the first UK exhibition by an American photographer called Mitch Epstein, and it's called American Power, and it's a big project that he spent years working on.
It seems like the main industry of Liverpool now is culture, really. I mean, there's this vast barrier of galleries. Is there more of that going on here than elsewhere?
Liverpool's a big centre for visual arts now, and so there's a bigger concentration of museums and galleries here than anywhere else in the UK outside London.
Right.
And yeah, Liverpool is rebuilding its economy to a certain extent on these things.
The centrepiece of the gallery's opening programme is Mitch Epstein's American Power, a series of large-scale images created between 2004 and 2009 of energy production sites and their surrounding areas across 25 US states. Is it in any sense didactic? I mean, is there a message in this exhibition?
No, there's absolutely no message other than the place that I personally arrived at, which is to stand in front of this work in the way that I stood, in a very personal way, in front of this landscape, and looked at it with critical engagement, with empathy, with respect. And so I want the viewer to come to the work, to experience it as a work of art on paper. Some of these pictures are also, in a larger sense, engaging with other photographs. If I'm dealing with, say, photographing the American flag, I'm dealing with an icon. I'm having to think about Andy Warhol or, Rauschenberg. How do you deal with photographing the American flag that doesn't instantly succumb to contrivance?
Right.
So here, in part, this is a weathered flag. It's exposed to the elements. It's got these funny kind of holes, punctured through it. And yet, it does set up a relationship between industry and nation. And that's interesting.
Since 1980, Open Eye has been collecting photographers' work and has accumulated more than 1,600 pieces. Until the new gallery opened, they were unable to show off this collection. It includes a number of high-profile pieces by Martin Parr and Tom Wood, and a remarkable record of Liverpool life through the ages.
So we'll start by looking at some images by Bert Hardy. He was a British photojournalist and press photographer. He worked for the Picture Post in the 1940s and 50s, an important photojournalistic magazine. But he also served with the Army Film and Photographic Unit in the Second World War. The Picture Post asked him to come to Liverpool in 1942 to photograph the Chinese community. We can see his quite kind of formal style, really, and his aim was just to kind of capture the moment, just to kind of freeze the experience as he found it. But some of these look like they could just as easily be film stills from American gangster movies. And things.
Very dramatic, aren't they? I mean, I suppose they're also very much in that tradition of, Picture Post, Life, Newsweek, that kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is another important image in our archive. It's by Edward Chambray Hardman. He was an Irish photographer. So this is the birth of the Ark Royal. It's taken in 1950 from standing on Holt Hill in Birkenhead, looking down towards the Camel Laird shipyard. And that's the Ark Royal ship just before it was launched by the Queen Mother. In this image, he used a process called Cochin Naval, and that's where you apply red dye to the positive transparency in order to kind of tone down areas of brightness and contrast. So he was, it's kind of, you know, Photoshop before Photoshop, really.
Yeah.
Apparently this building here, this house here, the side of that house was whitewashed. And so he applied a red dye there and in some other areas of the foreground so that those tones would just flat back, just to really highlight and dramatise that, that whiteness of the ship. Here's some more work from our archive from the 1980s. Tom Wood lived in New Brighton for about 18 years, and that's where he kind of made most of his work documenting working class at leisure, focusing on New Brighton where he lived. So he was here making his project called The Last Resort, and his friend, Martin Parr, came over for a visit and kind of saw what he was doing, what an interesting place it was, and he decided to move to New Brighton as well, and it was from there that the two of them continued making their individual projects called The Last Resort.
It encapsulated something that was very important to me, and that's the sort of ambiguity you can have in photography. It was during the Thatcher years, and of course Thatcher was telling us what a great country we were again. I was up in Liverpool, and it felt very distant to what she was saying as a London politician. So here we have this shabby backdrop of this rundown seaside resort, and yet the people are still going there, the domestic activity is being played out. And it's really, if you like, the contrast between the domestic scenes of everyday people going on their family day trips to New Brighton with this backdrop, this rundown northern seaside resort, was the main point, if you like. It became, if you like, a slightly politicalised sort of motivation for me.
Thanks to this new building, the Open Eye Gallery now has a dedicated archive space, this space, in which elements of that work that we just saw can be displayed. And the inaugural exhibition is Chris Steele Perkins and his collection of photographs, The Pleasure Principle. Chris, I mean, I feel that this is, you know, a picture I've lived with, really. I mean, this is a very well-known picture.
Yes, it seems to have become so. Yeah, our dear Maggie, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, the start of it is him, surely, really, in a sense.
In a way, yes.
I mean,
it's, you know, in a way, it's about what's going on around her almost, rather than her.
Yeah.
And she does have a expression that you don't really associate with her, I think, in this particular picture.
Yes.
But, you know, Conservative Party conference, I mean, she was obviously the star of the show.
Yeah, and she looks... Yeah, she's the only one, I mean, which is the terrifying thing, she's the only one that looks normal. What does having this new space allow you to do that the old space didn't?
People aren't intimidated by photography because everybody does it. And so we get all sorts of people, and part of what motivated the move down to this new place was to get our doors wider open and bring in even wider audiences.
So, the new Open Eye is a valuable addition to this extraordinary concentration of museums and galleries in this area. And it's a fine space in itself, both to look at photography, but also there's the archive, which will be a valuable resource for the people of the area, both for them to see how they were and how they might be in the future.